You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Thanks so much for joining me here today on this Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesday, where I'm excited to bring you the topic of 10 unhealthy health foods I will not eat or recommend. And here's why. Right now, with our corporate-based, economy-based, media-driven marketing system, they try to promote these really cheap foods that are essentially more processed foods. And they lead us to believe they're either going to help us lose weight, they're going to help us fight aging, or they're going to help us get well. But the problem is they don't do any of those things. And I would actually argue they make us more sick, they cause us to gain even more weight, and they make us age at a much faster rate, even if they contain less calories, as you will see today. So what I want to do is I just want to present to you 10 items that I see every single day come up in my practice, or maybe with families debating of whether they should give them to their kids or not, or that I might see in the media, that I might see in a commercial or in a print advertisement. Any one of those things that I believe that we all need to become more aware about, because what happens is it's a lot of times these ingredients that sneak into the easy to grab foods that you can just take on the go. A lot of times that's where we're going to run into our problems. We know we're not going to run into those problems a lot of times when we're grabbing our fresh fruit or fresh veggies or whatever it might be, right? Like, okay, hard to fight against those specific foods, but a lot of times it's the convenience-based foods, even sometimes in their whole form, that can be an issue for us. So I'm not going to go over your typical like Cheez-Its cracker or something like that. I'm not going over that today. I'm going to go over the ones that are marketed as real health foods, but honestly, they're anything but that. So without further ado, let's just dive right into today's topic. And the number one food, it's not number one on my list, meaning like this isn't 1 through 10, number one being the worst. The top 10 foods that I've seen. And the first one, just first and foremost, just because literally I had this conversation again last week with, I'm going to be honest, a lot of families have a very difficult time removing this one food from their children's diet. Now, they wouldn't eat it themselves a lot of the time. They know it's not good for their health, but they do it for their kids. And they believe they do it for their kids because their kids need their calcium, or their kids, they won't eat anything else, or they're picky eaters, or any one of these things. And they know that they're not health food. So basically what they're saying is, I know it's not healthy. I know that it might be making my child sick in the long run, but it's an easy food to give my child. And believe me, I have 2 kids of my own, so I understand where you're coming from. I get that. But at the same time, we do not want to set our kids up for the ear, nose, and throat issues, right? With the tonsillitis, the sinus infections, the earaches, especially during those colder months, or the mucus production, the allergies, the asthma. This food is all linked to all of those things. The digestive issues, the constipation, the diarrhea, and that's dairy. That's cow's milk dairy. Feel free to make the argument for goat or sheep. That's not the discussion I'm having today. The discussion I'm having today is over drinking cow's milk, right? Or it's having cow's milk, even yogurt or cheese. These things are not health foods. They simply not. And if you want an in-depth show on this, I'm going to give you a couple links today. You can go way back to Cabral Concept 185. All right, so go way back, stephencabral.com/185. Or for all podcasts, you can just go to stephencabral.com/podcast, and you can just type in your keyword right there, and you will find a whole show essentially dedicated to that. But the reason why dairy is not a health food, especially cow's milk, and again, you can go back to 185 for all the different reasons about how the cows are raised, all of those different things. But first of all, the protein molecule is essentially not even able to be digested. This person last week who wanted to have the argument or debate with me, which I just wasn't willing to have, that they're worried that their child is going to not produce an enzyme called lactase anymore if they remove lactose from their diet. And I was like, what are we even talking about? Like, First of all, yes, like that might lead to cramping and bloating or whatever, but that enzyme is going to start to dissipate anyways with every year after life after about the age of 3 or 4 or 5 years old. And that's because a child would have weaned off their mother's milk after the age of 2 or 3 or maybe 4 as a supplement to their actual whole food, right? Like this is going back thousands of years of evolution. I mean, that would have already happened. And we know that in most African American cultures, 75% of all African Americans don't even contain the enzyme lactase, especially after mid-childhood. That's 75%. 95% of all Asians do not contain the enzyme lactase. So really, like, we're having like a moot point discussion. And the other thing is that the real issue doesn't even come from the gas, the cramping, the bloating, from the sugar in milk. Yeah, you could ferment that out essentially through making a yogurt or something like that. The real issue comes through the protein. It's the protein that's more inflammatory. It's the protein that makes it the number one food sensitivity in the world. Any clinician, any functional medicine doctor that runs food sensitivity testing from an IgG perspective, and I can't recommend this enough, I will link it up in the show notes. Prove it to yourself. Like, I've had both of my kids food sensitivity tested. We don't even do a lot of dairy. There's still some sensitivity. We don't do any cow's milk. We don't. So when you look at that, I'm showing you, I'll put in the food sensitivity test. It's the number one food sensitivity from an IgG perspective. IgG just means delayed reaction, a day or 2 days or 3 days later. And that's why a lot of parents don't understand it. It's not their fault that when you give a child dairy, you give yourself dairy, nothing happens that day. It's the next day where you get more inflammation, more mucus production, more brain fog, more of the headaches, more of the lethargy, right? The inability to focus and concentrate. And we blame all these different things and all these different labels that we want to give children and ourselves, where they're a slow test taker, they're a slow learner. And again, I'm not coming down on you if that's what you're dealing with right now. I'm not. What I want to do is to help you to give your child and yourself the best leg up in life. That's it. And yes, there are some people that it takes them longer to process. I understand that, and I'm not disagreeing with that. But what I want is for you just to help yourself and your child get the most out of their abilities, out of their talents, and that's it. That's basically it, because we all have different gifts that we're given in life. Some people, slower test takers. That's fine. Like, that's not going to be like where they excel at. Big deal. No big deal, right? It's an issue with our school system, not an issue with your child. Your child is perfectly fine. There's an issue with how we're forcing children to take tests and how we memorize facts and have to regurgitate. That's not a child's fault. That's just the system that we're simply up against. That's it. What I want you to do, though, is remove these harmful foods from the diet. Okay, I spent a long time on dairy, all right? I'm going to move on to the others. They're not going to be quite as long as that. Veggie burgers, all right? Number 2, so-called health food that is anything but healthy, unless you find the rare 1% of veggie burgers that can be pretty good, or you make it yourself with black beans and other healthy ingredients. What I want to do right now, though, is give you the exact ingredients, and I think you'll agree with me now, of why these are not health foods. Now, again, if you simply go by one burger, right? If you just go by the calories, you'll say, okay, this veggie burger has 120 calories. Only 4.5 grams of fat, only 1.5 grams of saturated fat. It only has 5 carbohydrates, 4 grams of fiber, 0 grams of sugar, and 15 grams of protein. Well, from a lot of people's estimation, this is fantastic. 5 grams of fat, 5 carbs, and 15 protein, 0 sugar. Perfect health food, will help you lose weight. Wrong. Watch how inflammatory this burger is. I mean, it's absolutely horrifying, the ingredients. Now, what am I giving you? This is not a needle in a haystack veggie burger. This is the number one veggie burger in America. So here's the deal. This is the number one veggie burger in America that you might be served at your restaurant and that you can get in most grocery food stores. And again, good macros, 5 fat, 5 carbs, 15 protein. Wow, I mean, look at that, right? So supposedly healthy for you, but again, it's anything but. Here are the ingredients. And I'm going to read them in order that they show up, which means it's the order. It's the largest amount to the smallest amount. First ingredient, water. Second ingredient, soy protein concentrate. Soy protein, I don't know if this is non-GMO or not, but over 90% of soy protein is genetically modified. And again, you've heard me talk about the dangers of soy protein on previous podcasts, not on soy in general, but on soy protein. Cheddar cheese. That was the third ingredient. Wheat gluten, corn oil. And then the rest of it just goes on to talk about soy protein, salt, caramel color, cheese powder, cream, salt, lactic acid, dried onions, yeast powder, natural flavor, sesame oil, disodium guanylate, disodium inositate, browned in corn oil. I mean, it couldn't get worse for you. I mean, honestly, if you thought about, let me think about the most inflammatory foods I could possibly put in my body. Hey, why don't I make a veggie burger out of it? Because that's exactly what they did. They took essentially GMO soy, all right, GMO corn and corn oil, which is hydrogenated, which is basically trans fat, and they took dairy, the number one food sensitivity. So now you have soy, you have dairy, and you have gluten. Okay, so now we're basically at all the top food sensitivities. The only thing they didn't throw there was eggs. So when you look at this, I mean, it's the worst food you could put into essentially a veggie burger all rolled into one. That's it, but it's extremely cheap, and the macros look good, right? The macros are the fat, the carbs, and the protein. That's the problem. We have to look at our ingredients. So veggie burgers are not a healthy option unless you know your ingredients. Super important. All right. I never talk negatively about products. I know that's a double negative right there, but it's not something that I choose to do. I choose to bring positivity as much as I can on this podcast, but this is the number one veggie burger out there. Check out your veggie burgers. See if they have horrifying ingredients like that one. All right, number 3 is this. Fruit juice. Your morning apple juice, your morning orange juice. I've talked about this in the past. You're drinking pure sugar. If you buy orange juice, it's already been heated. You're losing your vitamin C. You're losing all of the great enzymes. They've been heated up. They've been pasteurized. You're basically drinking 32 grams of sugar per 8-ounce glass or 12-ounce glass of fruit juice in the morning. That is not the way you want to start your morning. It does not contain the fiber. It is nothing like eating an orange. It's nothing like eating an apple. It's nothing like our daily fruit and vegetable blend, which is 22 organic fruits and vegetables. That's high in fiber and low or no sugar. So when you look at that, what you're going to get from a glass of juice is a glycemic response, a very high blood sugar spike. And then you're going to crash an hour later, and you're going to be more hungry, and you're going to be more tired. Please do not start your day with the old school thought of having a tall glass of orange juice or fruit juice. What I'd recommend is a tall glass of either the daily fruit and vegetable blend or a fresh pressed green juice. Any of those would be totally fine. But what you don't need to do is start your day with a blood sugar spike. Now, when you make a smoothie, which you can check out on episode 270, which is my top 7 smoothie recipes for wellness and weight loss. It's completely free. Literally, you can just download it. It's a PDF, and it's the smoothies that I use every day in my practice for both wellness, and then also it tells you how to make it for weight loss too, if you want that. And then 364, episode 364, I'll put these in the show notes today, would be for the green juices. And the green juices are fantastic as well. You can fresh press your own, or for a fraction of the price, you can also do the daily fruit and vegetable blend, which I'll link up. Today's episode is 880. StephenCabral.com/880. Now, again, you can still get great whole food nutrition and hydration. Do it however you want. You can do what I do every morning, which is basically like my natural Gatorade. I do a squeeze of lime in water. I do a pinch of sea salt. I do, of course, water. And then I put in a tablespoon of the daily fruit and vegetable blend. Sometimes, if I want a little sweetness, I will do a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of raw honey or raw Manuka honey. What is that? It's only 5 grams of sugar maximum, and you get all the prebiotic benefits of the raw honey as well, and not enough to spike blood sugar. But of course, you don't have to do that raw honey if that's not meshing with your actual nutrition plans right now. But a lot of people who wake up with low blood sugar have no problem with that at all and only get a little bit of benefit right there. Far cry from 32 grams of sugar on an empty stomach, especially if it's followed up by coffee. Not ideal. So remember, smoothies contain the fruit, and it's been blended, so it has all of the fiber with it. And you're also typically mixing it with something like the Daily Nutritional Support Powder, which contains 15 grams of vegan protein. So again, that's going to slow down that glycemic response. Now, I will say, and I do agree, there's some pretty good research on there by using fresh pressed carrot or fresh pressed blueberry juice, things like that, that can actually moderate that glycemic response. But again, I just don't know too many people out there doing pressed blueberry juice in the morning. We're talking about your higher glycemic ones, and we're talking about not having that fiber, and we're also talking about store-bought. It is different when you get into the fresh pressed. However, I'm a big proponent of juicing your veggies if you'd like, but eating your fruit or blending your fruit. All right. Number 4 is this: processed meat. And that means items such as preserved or cured or smoked meats. Salami, pepperoni, prosciutto, bacon, any of those things. Again, I have a podcast on essentially bacon. I have a podcast on a lot of those different shows. Now, a lot of people enjoy those things. I have to be honest. I do as well. I come from a background of more of a Mediterranean culture where you might do a charcuterie board or something like that, especially as like before dinner. And salty, cured meat, a lot of people like those specific things. I'm one of those, but I don't eat it. And so there's a difference being like, okay, I can make my decisions. I get to choose whether I want to eat this or not, even if I love it, right? So here's the deal. This is one of the top 10 carcinogens in the world for food. So meaning that when we look at what are all the things that can cause cancer, one of the highest ones, charcoal meat, that's a little different. That's acrylamides or acrylamides. There's different ways to pronounce that. And those are all cancer causing. So carcinogens, cancer causing. Smoked meats is actually in the top 10. Conventional medicine, scientific studies, everyone agrees on that point. We're not talking about saturated fats. We're not talking about any of those things. We're talking about preserved, cured meats. So just keep in mind, every once in a while you want to do it, okay. If you're eating smoked meats or cured meats or salamis or things like that, or you're giving to your children because it's easy to make a sandwich out of them, I just want to warn you, I understand the convenience. And again, I understand how hard it is raising kids. Believe me, I get it, and how picky they can be. But this is one of those foods that is not doing them or you any favors. All right, number 5 is this. I've really had to think about my consumption of a lot of these fish over the years. These larger fish, right? Chilean sea bass, tuna especially, swordfish. All of these fish, the large fish, contain a lot of mercury. I started doing hair tissue mineral analysis testing about not quite 10 years ago, but pretty close to it in my practice. We do as much or more than literally any practitioner, I would say, in the US for hair tissue mineral analysis. And the reason is we find it so beneficial in a hair tissue mineral analysis to look at overall electrolyte patterns, which can show stress patterns on the body, overall trace minerals, and we'll look at things like chromium and selenium and phosphorus, manganese. We'll look at a lot of these items, but we'll also look at heavy metals. Now, heavy metals can be found in the blood. They can be found in urine. I don't disagree. Great test. No problem with that at all. But if heavy metals are high on a hair tissue mineral analysis, there's a huge issue. So we know if we find someone with high levels of aluminum or high levels of mercury, that there's a serious problem, that this person's body is just trying to excrete and get rid of these heavy metals. So that's why I'm a huge proponent of the hair tissue mineral analysis as a good overall baseline, good overall test. It's part of our starter kit. Our starter kit is the organic acids test, which shows a lot of your gut function. And it's a remarkable test. I won't go through the whole thing, but it shows a lot of your vitamin levels. And then when you do your hair tissue mineral analysis, it looks at a lot of your mineral levels. So if you do both of those, you get such a great insight into what deficiencies or toxicities you may have. So that's why we call it kind of our starter kit. If you're looking for a place to start, those two labs are amazing. And we give a nice little $100 off discount because we just want people to bundle those whenever possible. So huge fan of that. But that's why, I started doing it in my practice, let's say close to 10 years ago. But 20 years ago, a functional medicine practitioner had me do it as I was on the road to getting well. And I was trying to eat healthy. It was during my natural bodybuilding days, and I was having a can of tuna every night with rice because I was a poor college student. And I would put olive oil on top. Olive oil, pretty good. Rice, not so bad, but I used to microwave it in a plastic bag. Not good. And then I would dump tuna over it. So it was a 5-minute meal I could make that was high in protein, had some carbs, and had a lot of fat because I was trying to gain weight, put on muscle. But my mercury levels were through the roof. And so that was my first intro into, just because it's a so-called health food doesn't mean it's good for you, especially not in excess. So tuna once a month, probably fine. Tuna weekly or even bi-monthly, that wouldn't make sense. Twice a month, not ideal. Okay, sugar is up next. Sugar, alcohol, I should say. I hope we know that straight sugar is not a good idea for us. We're not talking about the natural sugars occurring in fruit, vegetables, and starches, such as sweet potatoes. But what we're talking about is sugar alcohol. So here's the dirty little secret in the supplement industry. So many protein powders, and especially so many protein bars. Like in the future, we want to formulate the best bar out there. Not a protein bar, a health bar. We're trying to formulate the best health bar out there And manufacturers want us to use sugar alcohol. And we just keep saying, no, we're not going to use sugar alcohol just to improve the taste. And the reason is that sugar alcohol is not good for your gut. Sugar alcohol, for the most part, really begins to ferment in the gut. And we work with a lot of people that have candida, that have Crohn's, that have colitis, that have IBS and IBD, and a lot of leaky gut or intestinal permeability-based issues. And they're on our Candida and bacterial overgrowth protocol or something for parasites or something for H. pylori. And we're trying to rebalance that gut. So if we give them sugar alcohol that's fermentable, we're feeding the bad bacteria. We're feeding the yeast. Not a good idea just because they don't have to label it as sugar. So that's the dirty secret is they don't have to label it as sugar, but it's still in there. And the other dirty secret is that sugar alcohol can still spike blood sugar. Marketers like to tell you that it won't have the same sugar spike. Disagree. In some people, especially those more prone to blood sugar dysregularity, those who gain more weight, and those with type 2 diabetes, the Joslin Diabetes Center, and believe me, they know a little bit about blood sugar. Again, like I'm not a conventional medicine guy, right? But I play no favorites and I have no biases. And they're out there saying, and I am in agreement with, that it can still spike blood sugar. And again, believe me, they have plenty of data to back up that sugar alcohol can spike blood sugar. But again, you never have to believe me and you don't have to believe the Joslin Center. What you can do is take your blood sugar before one of those protein bars with not a lot of sugar, but a lot of sugar alcohol. Take your blood sugar before it. Take your blood sugar an hour later, or a half hour later if you want, an hour later, 2 hours later, see what your blood sugar is. I think you'll be surprised that you see the blood sugar spike, all right? So it's not ideal. Stay away from sugar alcohol. So, number 7, gluten-free breads. I did a whole podcast on this. Let's see if I can find it for you. I believe it was called Why Going Gluten-Free is Not Good for You. Let's see if I can find that. Okay, Why Going Gluten-Free May Be Bad for You was the title of the show. And that was episode 565. I can't recommend checking that one out. Again, it does not mean that gluten-free foods or going gluten-free is bad for you, but it shows you all of the pitfalls of what happens when people try to go gluten-free. And the only reason I know them is because I went gluten-free way back in like 1998 or so. And this is way before the whole gluten-free revolution, 96, 98, somewhere around there. And it was not easy. Yeah, it was right around 96, 97. And that was not easy for sure to try to find those things. It was only in like small mom and pop health food stores at the same time. No such thing back then as a Whole Foods. No such thing as even a Wild Oats. I believe way back, if people remember it, there was something called Bread and Circus that eventually I think Wild Oats bought or Whole Foods bought, but it was not easy to find. So check out that show, 565. A lot of gluten-free breads can honestly, for the most part, be worse for you, like legitimately worse for you. Most of the time, if people want to eat bread, and again, I'm not recommending it, I'm like, with all the tapioca starches and the xanthan gums and other things like that, I just say you may as well have some Ezekiel bread with some sprouted grains rather than going with all the fake gums in there and the corn and all those different types of things like the genetically modified organisms. So we don't really want that. Again, bread is not a health food, I would say, in the first place. Just in general, it is a processed food. I'm going to be getting to that in my number 10 coming up. So I won't spend too much time on that, but just keep in mind, it's also a poor food combiner. Unless you're adding something that's more plant-based to that bread, if you're adding meat to it or cheese to it, again, just a really poor food combiner as well. Check out episode 565 for all the details about that. Number 8 is vegetable oil. So many people are out there saying, oh, no, this is made with vegetable oil. It's kind of like margarine or not better than butter. What's it called? Like Smart Balance. You don't turn a liquid vegetable oil into a solid. Can you understand like the chemistry behind that? If you understand molecular chemistry or the biochemistry of hydrogenating a fat and taking it out of its normal form and making it solid, I mean, you would never eat that food. So again, looking at margarine or looking at Smart Balance, and again, I know I said I wouldn't talk negatively about certain products, but they're not health foods. They're not health foods. Just because it's called plant-based butter, just because they use that fancy marketing term plant-based does not mean good for you. Trust me on this, really, really important. I want you to look into that. I'm just trying to bring awareness. Plant-based does not mean good for you. Gluten-free does not mean good for you. Low-calorie does not mean good for you. So really important point there. Vegetable oil should never be heated. It should not, okay? If you're talking about a seed oil or a nut oil, it's not meant to be heated. If you get it, it should be in a dark bottle. It should be in a small bottle. It's very volatile. It will go rancid with light. It will go rancid with oxygen. It will go rancid with heat. You can use it as a vegetable oil. You can use it with slow cooking with other antioxidants like they used to use a little bit in Ayurvedic time. But I just highly promote not cooking in oil. And again, you can check out my previous podcast for what to do instead. Plus, keep in mind that the number one vegetable oil is canola oil. And 93% of all of that is genetically modified. We're talking about when you genetically modify something, and again, I've done a whole show on this before as well. So you can type in GMO if you'd like it to stephencabral.com/podcast. But when something's GMO, the only reason they make it GMO, just keep this in mind. The only reason they make it GMO is so that they can douse that crop with a massive amount of pesticides. That's it. That is the reason why. There's not another reason. I mean, honestly, that's it. So that it can withstand the large amount of neurotoxins and chemicals that they're about to spray on that plant. So now, even if it wasn't GMO, would you really want to put that much bug spray into your body, like to chew on that much bug spray? Most people, when they hear it like that, which is the truth, and I write about this in my book, The Rain Barrel Effect, that's one of the top 10 toxins, that you'll understand that that is not something, of course, that we want to be doing. But this is why we're all so sick, right? Because nobody tells us that. Nobody, right? Because the problem is, and it's changing with the internet, it's changing with podcasts, it's changing with videos, that finally the information is able to be disseminated, because before you'd have to read a book to get all this information. But now, again, it's changing, which is really great to see. All right, number 9 is this, peanut butter. For the most part, again, are you grinding down your own peanuts and making your own peanut butter? Well, then the next question is, if you are, okay, then you're not getting the sugar added. But remember, most peanut butter has sugar added to it, okay? The second is that it's heated, it's high heat processed, which means that is going to really make the nut butter rancid. But the other part is this, is that peanuts are extremely high in aflatoxins, okay? So again, peanuts, cashews, they need to be roasted in the first place because they are toxic, essentially raw. But you have to keep in mind that the mold that grows on peanuts, for the most part, quite high. So there are actually peanut butters, and I always give you the other side of the story. There are peanut butters that are tested for aflatoxins, which are mold toxins. So check that out. They do contain some fructans, so we don't use it on our sensitive gut guide or our candida protocols. And most of them are made with sugar, and they're also hydrolyzed. So when we look at that, overall, not great for the butter. I'm not a huge proponent. I know it's more convenient, so I'm okay because it's a relatively good choice for like an almond butter, or my favorite would be more of a pepita butter, or I've reviewed that before. So if you type in pumpkin seed butter or pepita butter, which is PIPITA, they make a great one. And that's kind of like one of more of my favorites, or like a sesame butter would be a better choice. Okay. So if you want to go with more of the convenient, I get it. I understand. Nobody's perfect. And believe me, I'm not either. So I don't want to pretend on this podcast that I'm perfect at all. All right. So number 10, the last one is pretzels. Pretzels. Why pretzels? I know that for a lot of us listening, we're like, this is not a health food. But there are so many parents, and in my child's school, where they're eating pretzels. Sometimes it's gluten-free pretzels. Sometimes it's whole wheat pretzels. Sometimes it's ancient grains pretzels. I don't care what your pretzels are made with. Here's my test right here. Is this a health food? Take that pretzel, grab it in your hand, see if you can crumble it up into dust. I'm guaranteeing you can. If you can do that, here's what that means. That is a very high glycemic, blood sugar spiking food. Do we want that for our children? Do we want this white flour, no matter what it is, able to be digested that quickly, giving our children the highs and lows, or giving ourselves the highs and lows? And again, they put these in little sneaky packs called 100-calorie snack packs, or under 100 calories. Here's the problem. Not a health food. Yes, it's low calorie. Okay, yes, it's gluten-free, but if you turn it over, it's made from like white potato starch, right? Super high glycemic, or cornstarch. Again, not health foods, really sneaky marketing, and it's not just pretzels. If your little snack turns into dust in your hand, trust me, that is not a health food. So I just like to give these fun little tests. And again, it's not to come down on you. A lot of times we never know these things beforehand. And I also want you to understand that nobody's perfect. Have my children ever had pretzels before? Those little like ones that we're talking about, like the gluten-free pretzels or whatever. Yes, they have. Yes, they have. I'm not saying that. So like, again, like, have my kids ever had a gluten-free bread? Yes. Yes, they have. Have I had tuna in the last couple of years? Yes, I have. What I'm saying is that we do our best and we make this top 10 I just gave you an infrequent list. Like, have I eaten something with canola oil in it? Yes. You know why? That was my best option. And I was out at, let's just say, a salad bar or whatever, and I could have eaten a piece of pizza or some broccoli cooked in some canola oil, right? I'm choosing the broccoli and a little bit of canola oil as long as it's not dripping in that canola oil. But that's not an everyday occurrence. So what I want to say is I understand, like, I know that eating healthy is not the easiest thing to do. But what I want you to do is try to plan ahead, try to plan that next day. Like, that's all we can do. That's what we try to do. And then when you're stuck in a bad situation, make the best decision possible. But remember, knowledge is power. If you found this helpful, please do pass along this podcast to anyone you believe it could serve. And remember, all the show notes today, all those previous podcasts are at stephencabral.com/880. Check that out. All right, take care. Can't wait to chat with you tomorrow. Ever wonder what the best sauna, blue blockers, sleep trackers, wake lights, salt lamps, or other health gadgets are? Or what about the top non-toxic mattresses, sheets, soaps, bath products, toothpaste, and cookware? Or would you like to know the cleanest choices for hemp parts, meal delivery services, supplements, and much more? I personally curated, researched, and now created a resource page of all of my top picks that continues to grow each week. These are the exact products I use in my own life, with my family, in my private practice, and they're the ones I trust. To find out all of my up-to-date recommendations and all the details, simply head on over to stephencabral.com/resources.